Have you ever seen those adorable and hardworking guide dogs helping the blind and visually impaired lead independent lives? Have you ever wondered what it takes for a pooch to become a guide dog? And how do people in need find a guide dog? According to the National Federation for the Blind, in 2016, there were more than 7,675,000 visually impaired Americans. And Guide Dogs for the Blind raises and trains guide dogs for many of those people in need. Today, my guest is Guide Dogs for the Blind CEO and President, Christine Benninger, who will be talking all about guide dogs with me, about the Guide Dog for the Blind's mission, their programs, how puppies become guide dogs, how people interested in guide dogs get matched up with them, and on and on and on. So don't go anywhere. Matthew Felix On Air starts now. Welcome to Matthew Felix On Air, people who create, people who make a difference, coming to you from WordSpace Studios in San Francisco, California. Happy Gay Pride. San Francisco has been overtaken by revelers, as it is every year at this time. And Pride is also happening in New York City, where it's the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Riots. And according to Wikipedia, quote, the Stonewall Riots were a series of spontaneous, violent demonstrations by members of the LGBT or gay community against a police raid that began in the early morning hours of June 28th, 1969, at the Stonewall Inn in the Greenwich Village neighborhood of Manhattan. They are widely considered to constitute the most important event leading to the gay liberation movement and the modern fight for LGBT rights in the United States. A huge milestone, obviously, amidst so many others that have happened over the last 50 years, so much other progress and continues to happen. And although at the same time, much remains to be done, while we were celebrating in San Francisco and in New York, in Istanbul today, the celebrations were disrupted by tear gas. So we have a lot to celebrate, a lot of progress, but clearly not only abroad, but also at home, there's a lot more to be done. So good to keep that perspective. But again, happy Pride for everyone who is celebrating. And thanks also to all the people involved in Stonewall and everyone since who has helped to further the movement, and to those who are continuing to do so. Speaking of pride, a very different kind of pride, a more focused on me sort of pride, I was very happy this week that my new book, my latest book, Porcelain Travels, went back up to #1 in its Amazon categories. So that's travel humor. I think it also went to #1 in budget travel, and was near the top in some of the other travel categories. So I want to say thank you very much to any and all of you who might have helped get the book back on top. It's obviously so important just for marketing and exposure and just to keep the momentum up. And so I was really excited, and I really appreciate that. I was also, just in the interest of a little more self-promotion, I was kind of beside myself this week when I unexpectedly got a review back from Publishers Weekly's Book Life Prize competition for 2019. So I wrote my novel a couple years ago, but it's sort of undergoing a second life. So it was just included in the Creative Process exhibition, which I mentioned before, which is going to 40 leading universities around the world. And I'm planning a workshop based on the book about intuition that I'll be doing in the fall. And then the audiobook version is coming out in the fall. So I decided to enter in this contest, not really expecting much. And certainly, like I said, I didn't expect to get the review back yet. Well, it really sort of blew me away, and it just made my week. And so I'm going to read a quote here from the review. And the quote is, the reviewers for the Book Life Prize called it, quote, a highly crafted gem, which just really moved me. Felix's expressive pose invites readers into Pablo's worldview that remains fascinating throughout the novel, keeps pages turning with its enchanting prose and cast of characters. So part of the reason I'm sharing that is, again, because I'm sort of trying to fuel that fire of getting the book out there in this second round. But also, it's interesting because in our day-to-day lives, we try not to worry about what other people think and just to kind of, again, not pay that much attention to that. But as a writer and as creative people, it actually matters. Our success is often dependent on these reviews and the feedback that we get. So given that this is the second wave for the book, to get that review, like I said, it really, really just made my week. And so I wanted to share that. So go check out A Voice Beyond Reason. It's on sale actually for the rest of the day. I think tomorrow it goes back up to its normal price of $6.99, but the ebook is $2.99 for the rest of the day. So now's your time to get that copy. Get a copy of that. Okay. No show next week, and no show, in fact, no new shows, in fact, for July or August, because I am going on a summer hiatus so that I can take care of a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that I can't do when I'm producing the show on a weekly basis. And I need to do that now in part because fall is going to be very busy, starting with a Lit Wings event that I'll be doing in September. And I'm really excited about this event because rather than present about my writing, which is what I just did at the Lit Wings event that I did in April in Paris, I've been asked to talk about this show. And I was surprised when Aaron Byrne, the organizer of Lit Wings and dear friend and fellow writer, asked me to be the filmmaker at the Lit Wings event. I said, well, I don't make film. And she said, yeah, but your podcast. So I thought, okay, I guess that counts. So it's going to be interesting to get the opportunity to talk about what goes into this, what I've learned along the way and that sort of thing. I will be presenting with two other former guests of this show, best-selling mystery author Cara Black, who has her own new book out, Murder in Bel Air, and Ernest White II, who was also at the Paris event, who has a new show called Fly Brother that is debuting nationwide on PBS in January. And like I said, Ernest was just on the show, 3 or 4 weeks ago in a two-part show. So anyway, long story not so short, that'll be a great event in September. And thanks again to Aaron Byrne, Lit Wings founder and writer, for inviting me to participate. Last week, I was also thrilled to be invited to participate in 3 Litquake events in October, and then I have some other events in the work as well. Point being, I really need to take some time off to catch my breath, regroup, and plan for the fall, which is shaping up to be a really exciting time. Okay, enough about me, enough about all that, enough about the future. Let's get to the present. And presently, after this quick message from my host and sponsor, WordSpace Studios, we'll be back to talk with Guide Dogs for the Blind CEO and President, Chris Benninger. A quick thanks to WordSpace Studios in San Francisco for sponsoring Matthew Felix On Air. WordSpace's mission is to bring together writers and thinkers of all ages and experiences. WordSpace will soon be offering creative writing workshops, a literary book club, and guided writing groups. And Workspace is already offering writing residencies. They are submission-based, and they provide writers with room and board for up to 1 month. To find out more, you can email info@wordspacesstudios.com. Chris Benninger joined Guide Dogs for the Blind in April of 2014. Prior to joining Guide Dogs for the Blind, Chris spent 17 years leading the Humane Society Silicon Valley. During her tenure there, she and her team helped save the lives of tens of thousands of animals and greatly reduce pet overpopulation in Santa Clara County. Under her leadership, the organization was also able to build and raise $25.5 million to build the Animal Community Center, which was the first kind of facility of that nature in the country. Chris honed her business skills as an auditor with Arthur Anderson. I've been talking too much about authors. Arthur Anderson, maybe he's also an author, as well as in her 15 years at Hewlett-Packard. At HP, Chris held managerial positions in the U.S. as well as in Europe, and she has an MBA from a little-known school called Stanford University. Chris gives back to the community through her role on the board for not-for-profit Wildlife Impact, which is committed. I can't talk today. I got 3 hours of sleep, so just apologies in advance. It's going to be a long, long hour. Wildlife Impact is committed to protecting the diversity of wildlife and natural habitats throughout the world. And not surprisingly, Chris loves dogs and has 4 of her own, including Thea, who is here in the audience, or not in the audience. I guess she is in the audience, but she's under the table. And unfortunately, with my 3 cameras, I can't have Thea on camera. I wish I could, but just know that Thea's here with us. Finn, don't get too jealous. Finn, of course, is my career change guide dog that I babysit for all the time. But anyway, so Chris has Thea, who is a career changed golden retriever, who now serves as an ambassador for Guide Dogs for the Blind. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Matthew. It's great to be here.
Woo, thank you for your patience as I stumbled through that intro.
No problem.
Wow. Yeah, I really shouldn't do this on 3 hours of sleep, but sometimes you just don't have a choice.
No,
when your neighbors decide, as we were talking beforehand, when your neighbors decide to move early in the morning and forget to tell you, you can't plan for that.
No, I can't.
Okay, so first off, I can't help but wonder. So Thea is an ambassador for Guide Dogs for the Blind.
She is.
Is there any chance that she pulled some strings to get that job? Because that doesn't seem like a coincidence. I don't know. I mean, I met her. She's very charismatic, but I'm just wondering, did she maybe pull some strings to get that job?
Well, I feel very honored. I waited 3 years
Oh, really?
to get Thea. Right. So when I started at Guide Dogs, I told Guide Dogs that I would love to have a golden retriever. But our first responsibility, obviously, is to our clients.
Yeah.
But then the vast majority of our career change dogs go on to other, if they're not going to work for Guide Dogs, they either become what's called Canine Buddies.
We're going to talk all about that.
Yeah. Or go on to other careers with other service agencies.
Yeah.
So I waited 3 years for
years.
her. Yeah.
So it was meant to be.
It was meant to be, and she's amazing.
Okay. I don't doubt it. And my experience thus far of Thea is that she is, in fact, amazing. So you spent a lot of your career in the private sector.
I did.
And so before we get into Guide Dogs for the Blind, can you tell us just a little bit about why you decided to jump over to not-for-profit and specifically focus on dogs and pets in general? Because, again, you were at the Humane Society as well. So just a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was 15 years with Hewlett-Packard. I loved HP. HP was good to me. I was able to do a lot of different things with HP, including spending 3 years with them in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Where were you in Europe?
I was just outside of London, but I was responsible for the European leasing program. So I did lots and lots and lots of travel all through Europe. And I loved it. It was great for 3 years. It truly was.
And London's a great place to be based or close to London because it's so easy to make the jaunts to the continent.
It is. And an amazing city. Really fun. Really fun to be in.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking for a job. I really wasn't. But I was at work late one night and I opened up the Wall Street Journal and they had an ad for the CEO of Humane Society Silicon Valley. I love animals. I decided to apply thinking I'd never get the job, but I just wanted an interview to find out what they were looking for. Yeah. And I went through a series of interviews. Long story short, they offered me the job. I took it without even knowing what the salary was.
Oh, wow.
And it was the best decision I ever made.
Awesome.
It was a job of the heart.
Yeah,
it
sounds
really
like.
was.
I mean, if you took the job without even knowing what the salary was,
right,
that's a sign that your heart is in it, right?
My heart was in it.
Yeah.
And I'm glad I didn't think about it too much because at the time, they were having a lot of problems. They were probably 4 months away from closing their doors.
Oh, wow.
So it was truly sort of an emergency situation, which the board was not very good about letting me know about.
Oh.
So.
Yikes. So this was really a turnaround gig, and you didn't know that.
It was. Yeah, and at the time, we were taking in 55,000 animals and euthanizing 35,000 of them.
Oh, my God. A year.
A year.
That many?
A year.
Wow, I just got chills.
It was awful.
55,000.
Right.
Wow, and euthanizing 35 of those.
Right.
That's over the top.
And so I had an amazing staff, and over 17 years we worked. We reduced that 55,000 down to about 18,000, and we reduced that euthanasia from 35,000 down to about 500.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So when Guide Dogs for the Blind came along, I don't know if they came to you or you went to them, but there wasn't a lot of question about whether you were qualified for the job and whether you had the passion for the job.
Well, I retired from the Humane Society. I wasn't planning on going back to work. And after about 2 years, I really started missing being part of a team that was focused on...
Thea's getting restless.
She is. I apologize for that.
That's okay, Thea. She just wants some attention.
She was trying to stand up.
Yeah.
But, anyways, I really miss being part of a team focused on good. And I think the universe is a pretty amazing place because I started thinking about that, and then a mutual contact that somebody who was a business contact for Guide Dogs as well as the Humane Society let me know that they were looking for a CEO. So I applied, and
clearly it was meant to be.
I was honored to get the job.
But that was, I think, in your bio, did I say 14 years ago? Or what did I say in your bio? That's been a while.
It's 5 years. I've been there 5 years.
17 years at the Humane Society. That's where I was getting the teen. Okay, so 5 at Guide Dogs for the Blind.
Right.
Okay.
And I started in 2014.
In 2014.
There's the 14.
Okay. All right. There's the 14. I knew there was a 14 in there somewhere. Okay, so let's talk about Guide Dogs for the Blind, their history and mission. Sort of when, why, and by whom was the organization started? Yeah,
the organization was started in 1942. It was started by a group of people who had military roots, and it was started to serve those veterans who were blinded in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
So it originally started actually in Los Gatos,
Yeah.
California,
Yeah.
and 1942, by 1948, they had acquired 13 acres in San Rafael, and that's where the first campus was built.
Yep.
And then in 1995, Guide Dogs expanded with a second campus, which is right outside of Portland.
Yeah, I saw that, and I was curious why another campus so far away versus expanding here. I mean, I know obviously it's really expensive.
Yeah.
Was it just a financial thing, or was there more to doing it that far north?
You know, I wish I could say that there was a ton of thought and analysis in
Yeah.
making that decision.
Uh-huh.
Guide Dogs
That was long before you also.
It was before me.
Yeah.
But Guide Dogs had been given some property outside of Portland.
Okay.
And so that was the decision.
Hey.
And the analysis was really based on need. So we knew that there were more people out there who were looking for guide dogs, that we were pretty much tapped out on our current campus. And so that was the reason for establishing a second training campus.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to, I go on Wikipedia, or I went on Wikipedia because I was curious just about the history of guide dogs.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to read off a little bit here, and you might already know all this. Maybe some of it will be new to you, but it was definitely new to me, and I thought it was interesting. And you did just mention part of this, which is that the guide dogs, we started using them in association with soldiers coming back from people who had been at war that were visually impaired as a result of war. That's kind of when it started. So I just want to say here from Wikipedia, but way before that even, references to service animals date at least as far back as the mid-16th century, which in a sense isn't that surprising because humans have had, close relationship with animals for a while. But I just thought it was interesting that that's the first time that we see that in recorded history. And then, quote, the first service animal training schools were established in Germany during World War I to enhance the mobility of returning veterans who were blinded in combat. Interest in service animals outside of Germany did not become widespread until Dorothy Harrison Eustace, an American dog breeder living in Switzerland, wrote a first-hand account about a service animal training school in Potsdam, Germany, that was published in the Saturday Evening Post in 1927. So that's a little bit about the history prior to when it started in the States, which, like I said, you may or may not have known. And then we talked about you guys got started in 42 and moved to San Rafael in 47. So the organization has been around for
77
quite a while.
years.
77 years.
Yes.
Which is impressive.
Yes.
Something else that is really, really impressive that also blew my mind, and I realize that's probably the third time I've said that today, but this really did blow my mind, was all of your services are free of charge.
All of our services are free of charge.
So what does that include? When we say all of your services, what are some of the high-level things that includes, just to give people an idea?
Right. So our service model is unique on a worldwide basis. So we offer much more than any other guide school. But what that service model entails is obviously a guide dog. It's bringing somebody to one of our campuses, either in Oregon or in California, for 2 weeks of training.
Which we're going to talk about.
It includes follow-up services on a yearly basis to ensure that the teams are working together well and safely. And that includes actually physical visits out to see the teams working. We do have a sports center on our campuses, on both of our campuses actually, where people can call in with questions or concerns. And we also take care of the veterinary bills for our dogs.
That's amazing.
Over their entire life.
Yeah.
It is.
You guys are really impressive. The more I was reading as I was preparing for today, I thought it's all free on top of it. That's amazing. Right. We're going to talk about how some of your finances, and we're going to talk about a little more detail about some of the things you just mentioned. But thank you for kind of summarizing at that high level. So one of the things that most interests me about, and I think probably a lot of people, is how a puppy becomes a guide dog. And part of my interest in that stems from the fact that not all guide dogs make it. So it really is a sort of rigorous, and you've got to, they've got to make their marks. Your dog Thea underwent a career change, as people, watchers and listeners have heard me say a million times. Finn, my canine nephew Finn, underwent a career change, which is part of the reason I got, became familiar with your organization. So I'm curious about the process. But I know that before we get to training, there are a few other steps.
Quite a few.
Right, quite a few other steps.
Right.
And so the specific sort of high-level ones, I'm thinking of the breeding, socialization, and puppy raising before you get the pups ready to go into the training. So let's talk about first, where do you get the dogs?
So Guide Dogs for the Blind has its own breeding colony. We've got the largest breeding colony of labs and golden retrievers anywhere in North America. So we're a bit unique.
Yeah, that was another thing I
standpoint.
didn't realize, that you guys would actually be breeding in your facilities, in your
We
organization.
We do. And the reason for that is that the traits that are needed in order to be a guide dog are unique. And one of the things that I like to tell people is that our golden retrievers and our Labrador retrievers are not just labs and goldens. They're guide dog labs and goldens, and that's different.
And how is that different?
That's different. So what we're breeding for is we're breeding for confidence, because it takes a very confident dog to be a guide dog, and we can talk about why that is. But confidence, not dominance, sociability, and caring, as well as, medical stability. So our dogs actually are longer lived than what you're going to find in the normal lab and golden retriever.
Interesting.
Right. They have fewer of the traditional issues. Labs traditionally have eye problems, believe it or not.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
Yeah. Golden retrievers with hip dysplasia.
That I've
so
heard
there's
of, yeah.
very little of that in our colony, again, because we're managing that out. And what you're getting is this just amazing temperament that is really unique to guide dogs.
Yeah.
And anybody who's had one of our career change dogs will tell you that.
Yeah. The temperament really stands out, and that's why I think people are just drawn to them like magnets, right?
They
when
are.
you see them when you see them out. So we're talking about labs, though. So obviously, you've chosen a specific breed of dog. You recognize that those breeds exhibit those characteristics more than other breeds. It sounds like. And it seems to me, because in addition to the dog that I pet sit so often, when I'm in San Rafael a lot and I see you guys training on the streets, almost all the labs seem to be yellow labs. Is that just coincidence from what I've seen? Do you have a lot of black labs as well?
We do. It's about 50-50.
Oh, is it 50-50? Okay.
And there's specific reasons for that. So 70% of our clients are visually impaired, not completely blind.
Right.
And with a visual impairment, many people are able to see colors. So now if you can see light colors, we're going to pair you with a yellow lab. If you can see dark colors, we're going to pair you with a black lab.
Interesting.
So there's very specific reasons around all of that.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I also went to Wikipedia about labs.
Oh,
so I'm just going to read quickly about labs because I don't know that much about dogs. I love dogs. I don't know a lot. So I was just curious, where did the lab come from, right? So again, I'll be curious what of this you already know versus what you don't.
Oh, no.
But so from Wikipedia, the infallible Wikipedia, I'm told everything there is 100% accurate. Quote, the modern Labrador's ancestors originated on the island of Newfoundland, now part of the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. The founding breed of the Labrador was the St. John's Water Dog, a breed that emerged through ad hoc breedings by early settlers on the island in the 16th century. So again, we're going way back. The forebears of the St. John's Dog are not known, but were likely a random bred mix of English, Irish, and Portuguese working breeds. The Newfoundland is likely a result of the St. John's Dog breeding with mastiffs brought to the island by generations of Portuguese fishermen who had been fishing offshore since the 16th century. The smaller, short-coated St. John's Dog was used for retrieval and pulling in nets from the water. These smaller dogs were the forebears of the Labrador Retriever. The white chest, feet, chin, and muzzle, known as tuxedo markings, characteristic of the St. John's Dog, often appear in modern lab mixes and will occasionally manifest in Labradors as a small white spot on the chest, known as a medallion. The last thing I'll say here is that in 1822, explorer W.E. Cormack crossed the island of Newfoundland by foot. In his journal, he wrote, quote, the dogs are admirably trained as retrievers in fowling birds and are otherwise useful. The smooth or short-haired dog is preferred because in frosty weather, the long-skinned kind become encumbered with ice on coming out of the water. So it sounds as if our beloved Labradors have been hardworking, loyal pooches for a few centuries.
So I did not know any of that.
Okay, good. Good. Then I'm glad that was educational for you as well.
Great. Yes. Thank you.
I always like to just kind of do a little poking around. Okay. Hello, Susan from Scottsdale. Hello, Liz, Diane, Matthew, Aaron. I think that's everybody scrolling really quickly through the comments. Okay. So we've got the dogs. You have bred the puppies. We've got the puppies, but they don't just come out knowing how to interact. So there's some socialization that takes place. Can you just talk really quickly what that is?
Sure.
And I think that's what my friend Liz does. Is that what you do, Liz? Are you a socializer? Is that what people do when they volunteer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. So one of the things I like to tell people is we actually start socialization training when the puppies are 3 days old.
Oh, wow.
So this is very different, again, than a dog that you're going to get through any other kind of breeder.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really, really important that a guide dog is socialized with people, and we start that as early as possible.
Yep.
And that is increased over the next 8 to 10 weeks that these puppies are on our campus. After 8 to 10 weeks, they actually go out to their puppy raisers, and we have 2,000 puppy raisers in the 10 western states as far east as Texas.
Yeah, which is my next question, the actual raising. So again,
Yes.
I was surprised that you guys breed in-house.
We do.
And then I was surprised that they're raised out of house or off-site.
Yes.
And not only in California and Oregon, but I had the list of countries, like you said, not countries, states. Oh, yeah, Arizona, California, Colorado, Idaho, Nevada, New Mexico, Oregon, Texas, Utah, and Washington.
Yes.
So they go far afield.
They go far afield.
Yeah, yeah. And why
Right.
is that? Just because you just need the number, if you've got 2,000 pooches, that you just need a lot of houses and a lot of homes, rather?
We're breeding 850 to 900 puppies a year.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of people.
lot of
That's a
homes.
lot of homes that are needed. And those pups, we're very grateful to our puppy raisers.
Yeah.
Those pups stay with their puppy raisers for a minimum of a year. Our puppy raisers are organized into puppy clubs
Mm-hmm.
where there are, very strict protocols on how you raise a puppy
Yeah.
and when you introduce a puppy to certain things. And all of those clubs are then overseen by staff
Mm-hmm.
from guide dogs who are located out in the field.
And that staff then is presumably checking in, doing sort of home visits and things to make sure that the raisers are sticking to your guidelines.
So
or some variation.
Right. So our staff are actually working with the clubs.
Mm-hmm.
And they're checking in with the clubs on a periodic basis to see the progress of the pups.
Yeah.
And we work, our club leaders also work very closely with our staff. If we've got somebody who's not thriving well, not, doing well with a particular raiser, we'll actually change raisers.
Oh, yeah?
Each dog is an individual, just the way that people are. And sometimes somebody's a little more strong-willed. You may need somebody who has a little more experience. Mm-hmm. in dealing with some issues.
Well, and that's a theme that came up a lot when I was, again, preparing for today's show, which is the just this notion, which, again, anyone who interacts with animals, it doesn't come as a surprise, but it was interesting how much it came up in relative to what your organization does insofar as the personality of the individual dog. Mm-hmm. Whether it's training, whether it's the person that they're actually going to be matched up with as their service dog, that it really does have to be a match. It's not just like, okay, you need a dog, here's one we just trained. Next, who needs a dog? It really is.
It is a match.
Yeah.
It is a match.
Yeah.
And there is so much that goes into that match. So we work very, very closely with our clients, and it usually starts a year before they come into class to understand what their specific needs are and wants.
Okay, so let's, if we
Sure.
can, I know that I started to lead us down that path, but I'm going to ask you more about that.
All right.
I want to stick with the raisers for a second, the puppy raisers, because I have a couple questions there. One, actually, the first thing is just a comment. I saw that primary raisers can be as young as 9 years old.
Yes.
So can you tell me about that? Is it just that a 9-year-old, they already know how to feed and love, and that's sort of enough? I was surprised to see, obviously, that young could be a primary raiser.
I will tell you, our 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old raisers are unbelievable. And part of the reason,
Yeah.
they follow direction.
Uh-huh.
Guess what?
Yeah.
Us older people,
We know.
well, we know, we cut corners. We say, I'm not doing that. That's too much work. I'm going to do something else.
Right. Right.
Our youth raisers are unbelievable. Yeah. And
Okay.
actually, oftentimes more successful than adult raisers.
That's fascinating. Okay. And then my other question that I wanted to make sure we didn't skip over is, I'm sorry, if I raised a puppy for a year,
I know.
and it's still practically a baby after a year, right? I mean, it's still very, very much a puppy.
Right.
How do the raisers, do you ever have issues where you've got to send in, people to get the puppies because the raisers have become so attached? I mean, or does the raisers, they're just doing so many that they kind of know not to get too attached? I mean, it just seems tricky.
It's very
emotionally.
tricky. It's very tricky because it is extremely emotional.
Yeah.
We work with people. So when you sign up to be a puppy raiser, we don't just hand you a puppy. You have to join one of our puppy clubs. You have to be involved with the club for at least 6 months. You have to learn our training methodologies. You have to start with doing some puppy sitting. So over a weekend, before we hand you a puppy. And during that 6-month period of time, we work very closely to help people really emotionally understand what this is going to take.
Yeah.
Some people just decide, something, I don't think I can do it.
Yeah.
Because I don't think I can give this puppy back.
Yeah. Yeah. So people do recognize that.
They do.
I don't think, yeah.
I will also tell you that, it is really hard. And even for the most experienced racers, I start to cry at this stuff.
That's all right.
When their puppy comes back, they're crying.
Yeah.
They're crying. And and even when their puppy goes as a guide and is paired with just an amazing, amazing individual, they still cry because there's that bond. There's that bond.
Right.
But when you see what our dogs do and the difference that they make, that's what pulls you back for doing it again.
Right. This is part of a greater mission, a greater good. It's not about my connection with the dog, even though that's legitimate, but it's about something bigger here that we're working towards.
Right.
Wow. I love it. Okay. We have Kleenex over there. Could you seriously, Brad, there's some Kleenex, I think, on the training.
Yes.
So we've raised the puppies. If you need one, there's some
Thank
Kleenex.
You. Probably will.
Can you push it a teeny bit out of camera, though? That's the only thing I should... Or either bring it closer or... Thank you, Brad. Perfect. Okay, so we've raised our puppies. We have dealt with any emotional connection issues that we might have. And we've recognized, okay, they're ready for training. At what point does that happen? And then what does that actually entail? What's the sort of high-level training program then?
Right. So let me start by talking about the individuals who actually do our dog training and our client training. Because again, you don't walk onto our campus no matter how much experience you've had with dogs and start training. It's a 3-year apprenticeship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
So that 3 years is learning not only about dogs, our training methodology, but also learning about blindness, all the different types of blindness, adult learning, the different types of medical issues that oftentimes accompany blindness and how that could impact someone's learning. And it's about problem solving. So as you're training, every dog's an individual. There are going to be problems that come up.
Yep.
Every client is an individual. There are going to be issues that come up. And now you're taking 2 unique individuals, putting them together as a seamless team. That takes a minimum of 3 years to learn how to do.
I bet.
So our dogs come back at somewhere between 14 and 16 months of age. And then they enter our training program, which is a 12-week program.
12 weeks. Okay.
12 weeks.
Which seems, given everything, so we just got done talking about, 3 years of training. So 12 weeks almost sounds, and they've been away for a year. So much of this is big chunks of time. I was surprised that it's quote unquote only 12 weeks. Is that just because one, they're quick learners and because they only need to learn very specific stuff and they just pick it up? Or it just sounded like I was kind of surprised that that was that amount of time.
Right. So this is all a very well-oiled machine, right?
I'm sure it is, yeah.
So we start training when the babies are 3 days old.
The training starts at that age.
All that
The
socialization.
Right.
So part of training is feeling comfortable with the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if I'm traumatized every time I walk out my door, I can't learn.
Yep.
So all that socialization on our campus. Our puppy raisers are really great about training our dogs with their house manners, walking on leash, introducing them to everything in the world: buses, planes, trains, malls, restaurants, workspaces, crowds, kids.
So really they've been being trained almost from day 3, it sounds like.
They have been.
Right. So when we talk about the training phase, it's really about the working with the person being the guide dog.
Well, and it's learning their guide skills.
Right.
So the thing about a guide dog or guide service is that it's the most complicated type of service work of any of the services. Mm-hmm. And the reason is because a guide dog has to evaluate the command that they're given and determine whether it's safe to execute that command, and if it's not safe, they have to disobey the command.
Yeah, I loved that concept. You have a term for that, something disobedience.
Intelligent
disobedience. Yeah,
right.
The dog overriding the human's command.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, all other service work is taking a command. Mm-hmm. And all other service work is, if you don't get it right the first time, you got to check a second chance.
Yeah.
In guide work, you can't just walk somebody into traffic once.
Yeah.
You got to do everything correctly 100% of the time.
Right.
I couldn't be a guide dog.
Yeah. Me neither. I'm glad I'm writing and podcasting because I'm clearly not made out to be a guide dog.
Right. But all of that can be done in 12 weeks because of the methodology we use, which is positive reinforcement.
And there was something about clicker training as well.
Yes.
So can you just give us a little insight into those?
Right. So maybe if I could just start with a little bit of background about service dog training. Yeah. So traditional service dog training. So service dogs started in the military. Mm-hmm. And the first service dog trainers and the first guide dog trainers were military dog trainers. And so the type of training that's used in the military is basically punishment-based. So Guide Dogs for the Blind was the first service organization on a worldwide basis to switch from punishment-based training to positive reinforcement training.
Interesting.
And that made a huge difference for our dogs and for our clients. So punishment-based training is you set the dog up to fail and you punish them when they do.
Right. So
that they're afraid to fail again.
Right.
Positive reinforcement training is you set the dog up to succeed and you reward them for succeeding. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, both training methodologies, you get a well-trained guide dog. Mm-hmm. The difference is that with positive reinforcement training, they learn faster and they love to work because I'm rewarded all the time for doing my job.
That's why Finn needs so many treats. That's why he constantly needs treats, because he wants to be rewarded. Okay, this is making more sense now. No, but yeah, I love that. I love that concept and the difference that you're saying.
Right.
Yeah.
And think about it from our client's perspective. You know, their guide dog is somebody who's with them 24/7, gives them confidence, is their soulmate, helps them to safely get from point A to point B. Do you want to be punishing?
Right.
No, you don't.
Right.
You don't. You want to be, loving and rewarding, and you also want a dog that's excited when they see the harness and go and ready to work.
Right, definitely.
So that type of training methodology allows us to train in 12 weeks. What clicker training does is it marks the behavior that we want. So because it's faster to click than than it is to get the reward out of your pouch. So we mark it with a clicker and then reward. So the dog knows exactly what they did. And so it's very precise.
Yeah.
Clicker training is very precise. And then we can take that extra 1 or 2 seconds to get the treat out and reward them.
But the message has already been sent.
But the message has been sent. It's kind of like Pavlov's dog, right? You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to start clicking with Finn. Interesting. I love that.
Yes.
Okay. The one other thing I wanted to ask about the how.
Yes.
And then I want to just give some examples of some of the specifics of what they're trained, because there are some very specific things.
Yes.
And we probably already touched on some of that. But, you just used the example of they can't make a mistake, more than once. You don't lead someone out into oncoming traffic. Right. And yet part of the training, it says, quote, this is from your website, as the training advances, dogs are given the freedom to make errors. So at some point, and this I think goes along with the lines of what you were talking about, positive reinforcement and sort of a loving, supportive training versus, punishing them for making that error. Right. You do allow some errors during the training. Can you just speak to that a teeny bit? I'm just
absolutely.
curious.
So that's the concept of positive reinforcement training. You ignore the behavior you don't want.
Okay, so
someone
that's
makes
part
a
of
mistake.
Yeah.
We're going to ignore that.
Yeah, okay.
We're going to ignore that.
Uh-huh.
We're going to go. So you make a mistake. Let's go back and let's do it again. You got it this time. You're going to be rewarded.
So that's built in, essentially.
Right.
Is that,
as opposed to punishing you. You made a mistake. We're not punishing. We're not doing any of that.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. I love that. All right. So can you give us just a few examples of some of the specifics that they're taught during this 12-week guiding learning period?
Right. So one of the things that people have a tendency to think is that the guide dog has to make decisions around things like crossing streets or making a right or making a left. That's not true. That's why they're called a team. Our client or the handler is making the decisions about whether to go forward, to go left, right, or to cross a street. The guide dog is going to evaluate whether that decision is safe to do. And so part of that is, how do you train a dog to disobey a command? Right.
Again, the intelligent disobedience.
Right. And that's where the subtlety in some of the training actually comes. So for things like traffic training, right? How do you train a dog that you don't walk out into traffic? Or how do you train a dog around, a car can hurt you. You do not want to get in front of a car.
Right.
We actually do traffic training. We get really close. We don't. Nobody gets hit.
Really.
But we're training that dog. So there's a natural inclination when something is coming at you and it looks like it's going to hit you that you want to back up, right? You want to get out of the way.
Yeah.
So we take advantage of that. We don't hit our dogs. We don't do that.
Hardly ever.
Right.
They hardly ever get hit during this training.
No, never do that. But we get close enough where the dog naturally is going to pull back. Now we click and reward. You did the right thing.
For the pulling back.
You saw that car, you pulled back, and that's exactly what we want. And we keep reinforcing that, And then we keep pulling getting the dog to make that decision when the car's farther away and farther away and farther away. So
interesting. What are the dogs? I guess you already touched on this. I was going to ask you, what are the dogs not trained? But I guess no, you did. You just talked about that, and basically, it's that some of the things we might assume watching them that we think they're deciding really are coming from the
right. So one of the misconceptions is that guide dogs can read traffic lights.
Right. That was the one that I was thinking of, actually.
And no, they can't.
Yeah.
They can't.
Yeah.
They're actually colorblind as well.
Which I was surprised to see.
Yeah. So it's really it's the handler who gives the command to go forward.
Yeah.
But the guide dog, if a car, the typical situation is it's Prius, it's an electric car. You can't hear it.
Oh yeah.
You can't hear it.
Tricky. Yeah.
Right. So, it's the dog who then pulls you away from the street rather than walks you into the street.
Yep. Okay. So the last question, or the last sort of section of the training is the pairing with the client. So they've gone through their 12 weeks.
Right.
And then there's a class training when a fully trained dog is matched with a student.
Right.
So can you tell us just a little bit about that? And then we're going to talk about the other side of the coin, which is the people who are coming to be matched up with the guide dog.
So we actually, as I said, really start the pairing process probably a good year in advance. So when you apply to Guide Dogs for the Blind, we come out, we visit you. We want a good understanding of what's the environment in which you live, what's your daily routine like, what are you like? And the reason I say that is you're really an outgoing person and you love talking with people. We're going to pair you with an outgoing dog.
Right.
That's going to make eye contact, cross the room, and start to elicit, some interaction there for you.
So it's taking this whole notion of how dogs and owners look like one another or act like one another to the next level.
Yes.
You're doing it very deliberately.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are. But if you're somebody who does a lot of travel, we had a board member who has since retired from our board, but he basically over a 6-year period of time travels about 1 million miles, airplane miles.
Wow.
So that is a very unique dog that can travel all over the world.
I'm jealous of that dog.
All kinds of airports, all kinds of cities.
Speaks a lot of languages.
Versus someone who lives in the suburbs of San Rafael, right? And basically somebody who's going to a volunteer opportunity on a daily basis.
Right.
That's it's just a very different environment that one has to be paired with.
Right. And again, we come back to the personalities and
right. The other thing is that all of our clients are unique individuals. They have likes and dislikes. We talked a little bit about, whether you can see color, and we're going to pair you with a color you can see. But, some people really like Goldens. Some people really like males. Some people really like females. Some people like yellow laps. So on top of all of the requirements that you're going to need as just part of your life, then we also want to match you with exactly what you want in a dog.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So let's shift more to the person side of the equation.
Sure.
The handler side of the equation. Is a handler, what's the sort of official, what's the right term for the person who has the guide dog?
Yeah, we call them the handler.
Okay.
Right.
So what are there's sort of, I think, 3 sort of minimum criteria that someone has to meet to qualify as a candidate for to have a guide dog. Do you know what those are? Am I putting you on the spot? Because I have them here.
Well, let's see if yours match mine. So, first and foremost, you have to be legally blind.
That's what I was. Yeah.
Which means you don't have to be completely blind.
Right. Just legally blind.
Legally blind. Right. Secondly, you have to have a basic level of orientation and mobility skills.
Yeah.
And what that means is you have to know how to orient yourself as a blind person within your environment.
Yep.
You thirdly have to have a need for a guide dog. You have to have a need to go somewhere every single day. It doesn't mean that you need to have a job. But even if you are just going out and you like to walk in your neighborhood, a guide dog is going to lose its guide skills if it's not worked every day. And you're going to lose your skills as well. So you've got to be out working your dog every single day.
Well, and I would guess, too, you don't want to pair up a guide dog with someone who doesn't really need it, in the sense if they're not that active, if they're not out in the world,
Right.
you want to make sure that dog is placed with someone
Right.
where he or she is getting best.
Right.
Interesting.
Right.
Okay.
There's a fourth criteria.
Oh, there's a fourth.
Yeah.
This one I didn't, because you just scored 100%.
Did I?
did.
Good. Oh, gosh.
So now
I get to keep my job.
Now I'm just going to get a B or a C, though, because there's a fourth one here that I don't have. Thea, can you help us here?
So, I apologize. I dropped her leash.
That's okay.
So the fourth criteria actually.
Oh, we can see Thea.
Can you?
Thea.
Hey,
Thea, say hi. Yeah.
Say hi, sweetie.
There we go.
She's pretty.
Okay, she's gorgeous. She's absolutely gorgeous. Yes.
So the fourth criteria is that you live in an environment that is conducive for a guide dog. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
we've unfortunately had to decline individuals who are living in, usually it's more rural environments where there are a lot of off-leash aggressive dogs. So if a guide feels it's going to be attacked every time it walks out its front door, it's going to stop guiding.
I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I'd stop.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So there are some circumstances like that.
Right.
Okay. So another thing that I thought was interesting and helpful is you have a self-screening process. Mm-hmm. So I'm someone who thinks I might want a guide dog, but again, it's not for everyone.
Right.
What are some things in that self-screening process that help people get a sense for whether a guide dog is that sort of lifestyle really is suited towards it? Besides the sort of environmental stuff we were just talking about and the legally blind stuff.
Right.
But the self-screening, what are some of the things that come up with that?
So one of the things that we do is we have guide dog lifestyle workshops. Mm-hmm. And we do these all over the country. So it's an all-day seminar. We actually bring guide dogs in. We give people an opportunity to actually work with a guide dog. But there is a lifestyle that one has to have because, guide dog's another living being that you have to care for. Right. And I shouldn't say the secret, but the key to utilizing a guide dog as well is routine. So guide dogs are trained not to relieve in harness. But what that means from your standpoint is you have to have a very specific time when you feed your dog every day. Which means that there's a very specific time when your dog will be ready to relieve. Mm-hmm. So we can't ask more of our dogs than is appropriate. Sure. Right. So it's getting yourself on a routine as well. And usually that's 6 a.m. breakfast. Yeah.
That's really early.
I know.
Can we move that to a little later? I'm really not sure the guide dog lifestyle's for me. 6 a.m. breakfast. That's not going to work for me. Yeah. Okay, take me off the list.
All right.
Okay.
Right.
But I have a couple, there were a couple interesting specific things that I saw in your self-screening questionnaire. So one of the things was, quote, are you willing to travel with less tactile awareness of your environment? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Consider that guide dogs are trained to avoid obstacles rather than locate them as a long cane does. Yes. So that was a consideration I obviously never would have thought of, that you're going to have to kind of give up some of the sense of control that you have using your cane if you switch to a guide dog.
So you have to give out 100% of the control. 100%.
Tricky.
Because if you start thinking that you know more than your guide dog about getting you from point A to point B, pretty soon your guide dog's going to say, fine. You take over.
Right, you're the boss.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah. Some people can't make that transition. Some people really feel that they want that tactile feel.
Sense of, yeah. Particularly, it sounded as if people who still have some vision, because they might think that they can see, even if it's blurry, even if it's not clear, they might have a sense that they think they know the right way, and the dog is saying, well, actually, that's not best. And so they're getting that input, and so there's a conflict, and that could be tricky, I would think, at times.
It can be tricky, but that also can occur with people who have absolutely no sight at all. If they're used to using a cane, if they're used to, again, knowing exactly what is in your environment. Because when you use a guide dog, you don't know what's in your environment because your guide dog is going to take you around all the obstacles. Now, you're going to walk at the speed of someone, who is sighted. Mm-hmm. You'll be walking a lot faster than you do with your cane. Yeah. And we really believe, too, that you are also safer with a guide dog. But it's not for everybody. Yep. Yeah.
So I think it might be for me. I mean, we've just established it's not, because I'm not getting up at 6 to have breakfast. I know a lot of people, I did before I was a writer, and I had to go, be there at, be to work at 8 or whatever, but not now. I've only gone to bed at like 2 or 3 a.m. So you can understand a 6 a.m. breakfast is not going to work for me, but let's pretend that it does. Okay. And then I want to contact you and apply for a guide dog. Right. So I contact you, I do the self-assessment, I send in my form. And like you said, it starts a year before I might or might not end up with one. What percentage of people who apply for one actually do end up with one? Do you have even just a rough
so
sense?
that is significantly increasing. So 5 years ago, 60% of the people who applied for a guide dog were denied.
60% were denied.
And the primary reason was that they did not have sufficient orientation and mobility skills.
Mm-hmm.
And that is occurring. This is a crisis that is occurring within our country right now.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2008, when we had the great recession,
Yeah.
a lot of those services that are taught and paid for either by the state or counties were discontinued or focused on individuals who are considered to be the most employable, which are people, in their teens, 20s, maybe into their 30s.
Mm-hmm.
Most visual impairments now strike people in their 40s, 50s, 60s.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
So it's very hard to get those skills. So we've actually, 3 years ago, started a pre-guide dogs course where, also free, we have partnered with 3 other blindness agencies in the state of California and work with them to bring our clients into their programs for a week of intensive orientation mobility training.
Right.
And then our clients then go back home, they practice, we come out and visit them again, and within 6 to 12 months they'll come back for a guide dog.
Oh, great. So that's getting the statistics up.
It is.
Yeah.
It
Interesting. What is there a wait list?
There is a wait list.
Yeah.
The wait list is, and just really depends on the time of year.
Sure.
Right now, our wait list is between 6 and 8 months.
Okay.
Yep.
So
that's after
seems
acceptance.
reasonable to me.
Yeah.
Not that I would be a good judge of that, but yeah, after acceptance. Okay.
Right.
Okay, so I get accepted and things are moving along, and you bring me out to San Rafael or Oregon for 2 weeks.
We do.
Which, again, this is another part that to me just seems amazing. So what am I going to do in those 2 weeks in San Rafael?
Yeah.
And where am I going to stay? And how does all that work?
Right. So we have hotels on each of our campuses. So
crazy.
yeah,
It's so great. It's so great that you even put up the people that come out. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
We do, because this is all about, ensuring that there's a comfortable environment in which you can learn.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're having to, stay somewhere where the food's not very good, or it's, hard to sort of figure out where you are, within the building.
Right. They almost need to be on site.
You do.
That's the whole point of getting the guide dog, is to increase your mobility and your independence, which you don't necessarily have yet. So
Exactly.
Yeah.
So our classes start on Sunday. People fly in from all over North America, including Canada.
Yep.
We start with an orientation on Sunday.
And I'm sorry, before I forget, you have a sister partner organization in Canada, I think. It seems like
we have a fundraising arm in Canada.
Yeah.
We do all of our training in either Oregon or California.
Okay.
Yeah.
I knew I saw something about Canada on
Right.
the site. Okay.
Right.
So you were saying, I'm sorry, they fly in on Sunday.
Fly
from
in on
North
Sunday.
America, all over North America.
They start with their orientation, and basically that orientation just talks about what we're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks. We orient people on to their room, to the building, to the dining room, so people know how to get around. And then Monday morning it starts. And the first thing that we do on Monday morning is we do what's called Juno Training.
Mm-hmm.
So that is orienting people to the harness, but the harness is actually attached to a person.
Uh-huh.
And so we start with just getting people to get the feel of what it's like to actually work with a guide dog.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that afternoon is a pretty special day. And I cry at this.
Oh my God, she's going to cry again.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Again, no, it's beautiful. And I mean, again, it just shows your heart's in it. So
there's a lot of heart in this
Yes.
in this mission, that's for certain. And that's when our clients get their dogs.
Uh-huh. The first day.
The first day.
Yeah,
So it's Monday afternoon. They do not know the name of their dog. They do not know, although they've put in their, sort of their criteria of what they want.
Right.
There's still not necessarily a guarantee. So it's a pretty special meeting. So they're in their rooms, and the dog is brought to them.
Oh, so it's a one-on-one.
It's a one-on-one meeting. And they have the opportunity that afternoon to spend the afternoon with their dog. They can do whatever they want. But it's really getting to know their guide dog. And then on Tuesday morning, then we start with guide dog training. And half of our classes are filled with individuals who are coming back. We call them retrains for another dog, and half with people who are getting a guide dog for the first time. And what we try and do, so our classes are taught 2-on-1, so 2 clients to 1 instructor. And what we try and do is pair somebody who is a retrain with somebody who's getting a guide dog for the first time, because there's a lot of moral support. It's a hard 2 weeks. It's a hard 2 weeks. And there's always a slump halfway through, and everyone always feels, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to make it. And it's really great to have somebody who's kind of your partner in this, who can say, something, that's exactly how I felt. You'll do it. Trust me, you'll do it. And
what are some of the issues that are coming up, making me think, I don't know that I can do this? As I'm going through this training, what are some of those issues that are arising?
Sure. It's a lot to learn. So you're learning a whole new language. And what I mean by that is, you are a team. So the two of you are literally linked.
Right at the hip.
At the hip.
Right.
And you have to be comfortable with, giving all control to your dog.
Comes back to that again.
All control. Your dog has to start understanding your own idiosyncrasies.
I don't have any. So
me either.
That's fine. Yeah. So we would be fine.
Thea.
See, Thea's really well adjusted. You clearly have no idiosyncrasies either.
Right.
But some people do.
Right.
For those people who do, I understand.
Right.
Okay.
And it's also helping people make that transition from the cane to a guide. And what I mean by that is going from the tactile to using your ears. Because that's how you're making decisions now. Ooh. It's not on. So we're ready to cross the street. You have to be able to hear what the flow of traffic is.
That's a big change.
It's a big change.
Yeah, it's a leap of faith. It's a leap of faith to the pooch.
Yes, it is.
Right.
It is.
Right.
But, it's learning. And a lot of people, again, when they've been using the cane, haven't necessarily learned all the skills of using their ears.
Right.
For understanding and orienting themselves where they are. Doorways, when you pass a doorway, the sound is different than when you're going along a wall.
Right.
You have to listen for the flow of traffic. Is it going, parallel or perpendicular to you?
Right.
When is it, time to cross the street?
A lot of stuff you don't think about otherwise.
You don't?
Because you haven't needed to necessarily.
Exactly.
But now you do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Big changes. Okay. So are there some people who probably just say this isn't ultimately for me, but probably the vast majority make it through, I'm guessing.
So our graduation rate is 95%.
Okay.
So we have about a 5% rate of folks who either it's clear they're not going to be making the transition, or they decide, this just isn't for me.
Right. And good for them to realize that.
Oh, absolutely.
It's best for both sides.
Yeah.
And then you have graduation.
We do, and we highly recommend that people come to graduation. That's when the whole mission comes together.
Yeah.
It's every other Saturday on one of our campuses, and it starts at 1:30. You're usually done no later than 3 o'clock. You don't need to make a reservation. And that's where you, both our puppy raisers and our clients are there essentially celebrating.
Yeah. It sounds like there's a lot to celebrate.
There is a lot to celebrate.
Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit in the interest of time. So I've graduated. My dog and I were out and about. Or let's change perspective. I'm at the donut store, which is how it happens in my case. I'm at the donut shop in San Rafael. Fins outside, and we see the guide dogs coming. And of
Yes.
course, my inclination is to run out and wrap my arms around the cute guide dogs. But that's not necessarily the best etiquette. So what do people need to know insofar as how to relate to guide dogs when they see a
Right.
guide dog who's out and about and
Right.
they just look adorable and they have this beautiful temperament?
Right.
But what do people need to know?
Right. So if a guide dog is working, and how do you know a guide dog's working? It's
Yeah.
in harness, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That dog needs to focus. And so that's why we ask that people not try and pet a guide dog. If the team is stopped, we do ask the handler, can I pet your guide dog?
Yep.
Some people will say yes, some people will say no. But if a guide is, traveling, it's the same as if you're driving a car and all of a sudden somebody jumps on your windscreen, your
That's
windshield.
a good metaphor, right?
Yeah, you
Right,
can't
or
see.
analogy.
You don't.
Yep.
Oh my God, you don't know what's going on. So if somebody distracts the guide dog can make a mistake.
Yep.
So they need to focus.
Yep. Okay, and then, again, in sort of fast forwarding, a guide dog doesn't work for 40 years or 50 years or whatever. So how long does a guide dog work? For how long does a guide dog work? And then what does retirement look like for a guide
Sure.
dog?
Yeah. So our guides work 8 to 9 years, and our guides work longer on average than from other schools. And the reason for that is because of all of our follow-on services. We make certain that the guide dog has timely veterinary care and whatever it needs to essentially to stay healthy and working. So all of that makes a huge difference.
It all adds up.
As well as getting out and seeing the teams and working with our client to make certain that they haven't gotten into a bad habit that, could hurt the safety of the team. But our dogs work 8 to 9 years. We start preparing our client probably a year in advance of when we think that the dog is going to be retired. That's a huge issue. Huge issue.
Right. Again, the emotional side of things, right?
Incredibly emotional.
Yeah.
And so we start working with our client a year in advance. It's always the client's decision to retire the dog. It's not guide dogs stepping in.
Yeah.
But sometimes it like any emotional decision, you need some coaching and some help with doing that.
Reality check, maybe.
Right.
Yep.
Right. About half of our clients choose to keep their guide dogs, and the reason they do is because they have a family structure around them. So when you get if you come back for another guide dog,
because I still need a guide dog.
They still need a guide dog.
Right.
The challenge is that the relationship you have to have is with your new guide dog. 100% of your effort has to be with your new guide. You have, because otherwise the team is not going to bond and work seamlessly.
The other dog's right there that you had this 10-year relationship with. Ugh.
Right. So
God.
that's why there's a family. If you have a family structure, it's really important. Then the guide dog becomes the family dog.
Yeah.
For those individuals that don't have that family structure, oftentimes they will have family in the area, or they'll have a good friend, so that they can continue to see their guide. And then there's a few individuals that none of that is in place, and the guide dogs will come back to our facility, and then we will find a wonderful forever home for the guide.
Yep.
And it does take a special home for a guide dog, because they're not backyard dogs.
Yep.
They're not dogs that you go to work and you put the dog in the backyard for 10 hours.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about adoption. And before I forget, because I already did forget, Chris has generously agreed to take questions. And I know I already have one question here that we're going to ask.
All right.
But if anyone else watching right now has questions, now would be the time to jot them down, formulate them. And shortly we'll be drawing things to a close, and we'll take a couple, or Chris will take a couple of questions. So I forgot to mention at the beginning, wanted to mention that now. And so then I just wanted to say on this subject of retirement and getting a new dog, that the average client will have 4 guide dogs in the course of their lifetime. It says on your website.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. That's so you really are building very long-term relationships with your clients.
We are
40-year relationships.
Yes.
Yeah, that's incredible. Okay. Career change dogs. We've talked about them a little bit already. Thea's a career change dog. Finn's a career change dog. Not all dogs make it for reasons we've already talked about. Actually, I don't know. Did we talk about the reasons they don't make it? I think we did at the very beginning. But let's just touch on that if we didn't or if we did again, because there are a couple interesting things I know we didn't say. So what are some reasons dogs might not make it?
So the two key reasons that a dog doesn't make it is they don't have the confidence to make those independent decisions. Yeah. Or they're too distractible. Uh-huh. So those are the two issues.
Okay. Yeah. And then I also saw on the website that 40% are because of medical reasons. That it said, quote, anything from allergies to cataracts to varying severities of dysplasia, which you did mention at the beginning, can also come into play. Okay. You mentioned also at the beginning, let's just touch on this again. So we've talked about adoption, and we're going to talk more about the actual process whereby the dogs can get adopted, both retirees and career change dogs. But you mentioned the Canine Buddy program, I think, in the beginning.
Yes.
And there's some other things that career change dogs can go on to do.
Yes.
So can you touch on those briefly, please?
So we have been expanding our service offerings, and so we have what's called a Canine Buddy Dog, which is a dog that is a companion dog that helps to build confidence with children who are blind or visually impaired but are too young for a guide dog. And buddy dogs are pretty amazing. Yeah. And it's amazing to hear the difference that a buddy dog can make in a child's life.
I bet.
And the confidence that they start to build in just being able to do things independently.
And why are the guide dogs just primarily focused on adults? Is it just a certain level of, I guess it's maybe independence? Kids are presumably still...
Well, no, it's more, on average, we're looking at being at least 16 years of age. We've actually placed dogs with kids as young as 14. Okay. Mm-hmm. But what we're looking for is a level of maturity to be able to fully care for your guide dog. Yeah. So if mom and dad are relieving your dog or feeding your dog, you're not going to be... That team is not going to bond 100%.
It's got to be all you.
It's got to be all you. Yeah. So there's a level of maturity that needs to take place.
Makes sense. Search and rescue, medical alert work, pet therapy. So those are some other examples of the plethora of career changes that the pooches can undergo. All right. I was walking Finn the other day in Petaluma last weekend, the weekend before, and a fellow came up to me and he asked if Finn was a career change dog, and I said yes, and he said that he was on the adoption wait list.
Yes.
And so unlike animal shelters, which are trying to get, working so hard and don't have enough people coming to them for the animals. Right. You guys have the opposite opportunity, I guess, in this case.
We do.
Which is so many people want the dogs, and we talked about largely because of the temperament. But I suppose it's also largely because they've been so well trained and just sort of all of the above. But what's the process? You said you waited 3 years for Thea.
I did.
So tell us a little bit about, I want a guide dog, I want a Finn, I want a Thea. What's that process look like?
So just to set expectations, we have about 100 dogs that go for adoption a year and about 2,000 applications for those dogs. Wow. The vast majority now of the dogs that are placed for adoption typically have a medical condition that precludes them from other types of service. Mm-hmm. So Thea has dysplasia in her left hip, so she could not be a guide dog and she could not go into other forms of service. So we are, for those 100 dogs in general, we're looking for very special homes for those dogs. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And how old are the dogs who qualify for adoption?
So we have two types of dogs that come up. The vast majority of the dogs that are coming up for adoption are usually between 16 and 18 months. But we do have a few retired guides that usually are 10, 11, 12.
Yeah, the older ones.
Yeah, they go up for adoption.
And then let's say my ship comes in, my dog comes in, and you say, "Hey, you know what? We've got a dog for you." Then what happens? Because it's kind of interesting what happens.
Yeah. So, actually, we do an extensive interview. We actually have you come to campus. We want to make certain that there's a right match there.
But I loved, in addition to, I have to go to campus, but if I have a dog, I've got to bring the dog. And if I have kids, I need to bring the kids. So again, there really is sort of this all has to work with all the different parties. You got to make sure that this pooch is going to get along with the new pooch, and they've got to come out. And again, you can only allow the dogs to be adopted in those states that we referenced before.
Yes,
it sounds like
that's correct.
Okay. So as we wind down here and get to questions, we've got to talk about how people can help, because you are not for profit.
We are,
and the easiest thing is I can go on your website and I can contribute.
Please do.
And I can contribute one time. I can contribute ongoing. And the contribute button is on the website, which I'll say that it's guidedogs.com.
Yes, it is.
I think it's that easy, right?
Yes.
I have that in my notes to say at the end. Guidedogs.com. Go on, contribute now while you're thinking about it.
Yes.
But there's some other ways that people can help.
Right.
So can you share some of those ways?
Sure. So I'll just put a little bit more of a plug in for
Please do.
donating.
Please do.
Because we receive no government funding, and all of our services are free.
It's amazing.
And we're completely reliant upon donation to do what we do.
Yep.
So please do donate.
Yep.
In addition to that, though, this is a huge community effort. So we have 300 staff that work at Guide Dogs. We have over 4,000 volunteers that contribute to the process, and every single person is important. So whether that's being a puppy raiser, whether that's a campus volunteer who helps with socialization and walking dogs, whether that's foster volunteers, we have dogs that just don't do well in the kennels but are in our training program. So we're looking for people who will, house the dogs during the night and bring them back for training during the day.
Right.
Whether you're a breeder custodian, because all of our breeding stock live with volunteers. There are many, many, many ways to support the work that we do, and it really does take an entire city to do what we do.
It sounds like it. There's also one specific, you have a puppy center campaign.
We do.
That's one specific thing you've been working on. So can you touch on that while we're thinking about
So
ways to
we
help?
are building a brand new puppy center, and what will happen in that puppy center is where all of our puppies are born and raised for the first 8 to 10 weeks of life.
Yep.
And that center is, as I said, we have the largest breeding colony of labs and golden retrievers in North America. So this is a unique center. There's not a lot of places who do what we do.
Yep.
And that campaign is a $20 million campaign, and we have not closed out the campaign yet. And there are still many opportunities for supporting the building of that campaign, and there are many naming opportunities if people are interested.
Naming opportunities,
right?
But the construction is already underway.
The construction is underway.
Okay.
Yes, it is.
But we've got to finish the funding to lay the last brick and hammer the last nail, or whatever the metaphor might be. Okay. Let's talk. I have a couple questions here.
Great.
So let's take a couple questions. So the first question is from Liz. When a pup is career changed, and I don't know, I haven't read the questions yet, so we might have already answered them because a couple of them came in earlier. So let's see. When a pup is career changed, what other organizations do you work with send pups to? So what are some of the other organizations?
Sure. So we work right now with about 15 different agencies. Mm-hmm. Pretty much in the western states, actually, is where we, in the 10 western states. But our dogs go on to be PTSD dogs, autism support, wheelchair support, diabetic alert, seizure alert, court support, search and rescue. I'm trying to think of all the different careers. So there's a whole host of careers. Hearing dogs.
Sounds like we could all benefit from the training and have lots of career options afterwards.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're qualified to do quite a lot, or at least well positioned to be trained to do a lot of different things afterwards.
The reason is, if you think about it, is that guide dogs, doing guide work is, as I said earlier, the most complicated form of service work. So just because a dog is career changed from guide work, most all of our dogs will make terrific service dogs for other types of agencies.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, the last couple things I wanted to mention here. Thank you again, Liz, for that question. And the second question we answered, she asked, how many volunteers do you have across the two camps? And I think you said 4,000.
4,000.
Which is just incredible.
Yeah.
Okay, you do campus tours. Just want to throw that out for people who are local to the Oregon campus or the San Rafael campus.
We do.
And then, of course, there are special events that people can check out on the website. Is there anything, though, you've got tours, you've got the training, you've got... what was the other thing the graduations that people can go to? Is there anything imminent that we want to shout out about, or is it just all that ongoing stuff?
We do. So we have our big gala.
Oh, I didn't see this.
Yes.
Okay. I'm glad I asked.
Which is September 20th.
Okay.
In San Francisco at the Ritz Hotel. You can go online and order tickets.
Okay.
That will be it's a big fundraiser for us, so it's a great way that you can come and support guide dogs. You will have a great time. You will learn a lot about guide dogs, see quite a few dogs, and be able to interact and support guide dogs at the same time.
Okay, and that's, again, September
20th.
September 20th.
Right.
Okay, another quick question that just came in.
Uh-oh.
How does a person qualify to be a puppy raiser?
So,
because we talked about what they do. I don't know if we talked about how you vet them.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you go online, you can actually fill out an application to be a puppy raiser. And then based on your location, we will assign you to a puppy club. Mm-hmm. And then what we do is that we ask that you attend puppy club meetings, which meet once a week for about 6 months, to learn about our puppy raising protocols, our training. Within that 6-month period of time, you'll start actually doing some puppy sitting, go on some of the outings, and then after about 6 months, if all goes well, we will hand you a puppy.
Okay. There you go. All right. Thanks again for that question. Okay. guidedogs.com is the website. And then the site that I quoted earlier, I don't know if I did quote this in the intro. Yeah, I was like, wait, did I end up quoting that at the end? Because it's in my notes, but I did quote the statistics about visually impaired in the States I got from the National Federation of the Blind, which is at nfb.org. Are there any other glaringly obvious sites that we should be mentioning, or are those kind of the two main ones in this space?
Those are the two.
Yeah,
that's good.
Just want to make sure I didn't leave anything out glaringly obvious. Chris, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew.
Thea, thank you very much. You were very well behaved. We'd expect nothing less. But this is really interesting. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time to come in today, especially when so much is going on in the city.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. Thank you.
My pleasure. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, that is all for today. Thanks again to my guests, Guide Dog for the Blind CEO and President, Christine Benninger, Thea, and Brad, who's over there in the corner helping us out. No live show next week or the week after or the week after or the week after because, like I said, I'm going to take July and August off, but I will be back in the fall, so please, probably in the beginning of September. So please stay in touch on social media for updates on when I'm back live. And as always, thank you very much to WordSpace Studios for hosting and sponsoring me. They, again, are at wordspacestudios.com. For more about me, my website is matthewfelix.com, and links to my social media, books, other podcasts, and all the rest can be found there. If you have any comments, ideas for the show, or just want to say hello, I would love to hear from you at felixonair@matthewfelix.com. Thanks for listening and watching, and have a great summer.